My name is Daniel Evan Atkinson. I'm from Southern California.
Do you know that telling a story is one of the most powerful ways to connect with your audience? Do you know that the human brain processes story much more easily and quickly than facts and figure? Stories are a great way to engage your audience, get them interested in your products and services, and inspire them to take action. A good story will help you create more compelling content that can be shared on social media or through other channels. And it's not just about telling a compelling story, it's also about knowing how to tell it effectively. Now, do you want to better connect with your audience? Then join us on our online training class, Storytelling for Content Creators and Digital Entrepreneurs. Come to obehiair14.com/storytelling and learn how to leverage your storytelling skill to earn more as a content creator and digital entrepreneur. Storytelling is a powerful way to connect with your audience, so let's explore it together. See you in the class.
My mother's family, they come from North Louisiana, and that's where most of my value systems come from those people. And my grandparents were the children of sharecroppers, two generations from bondage. And if not for the prosperity that was brought to my family through World War II, where my grandfather became a Tuskegee Airman, I'm not sure my family would have been able to escape that cycle of poverty. But as a result of my grandfather's achievements, we have sort of been given a mandate for education and achievement that has resulted in two PhDs, no, three PhDs, my older brother, my mother, and myself, and several master's degrees. My youngest brother served in the 82nd Airborne, and we are a rather unique family, largely because of the fact that I know far more about my ancestry than most Afro Americans do. And I was lucky enough to have stable, sensitive, intelligent, capable men around. Most notably, my father, my maternal grandfather, and several uncles.
That's good to hear. Thank you very much for that. You have a lot of people that are sort of surrounding you now in the beginning. Now, I want you to speak about, give us some background about your teenage year, your growing up with your father, and tell me something about yourself as you were growing up.
Okay, I was fortunate in that my grandfather did 30 plus years in the United States Air Corps, starting off in the Army Air Corps when it was segregated, and then transferring into the Air Force. World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, flew in combat in all three theaters. So I grew up at the foot of the military base where he retired from, and as a matter of course, I was exposed to several different cultures. Being Southern California and so close to Mexico, I grew up with a lot of Mexican people, Chicano people, and being next to the military base, a lot of the other people I grew up with, there were mothers from Korea, Japan, Germany, all over the world. And because of that, it gave me a worldview that was a little bit different. It was also kind of out in the country, so we had lots of time to do stuff as kids. Where a lot of my friends who I met later, who grew up in cities, didn't have some of the advantages that I had growing up in the country, learning how to grow my own vegetables and things of that nature, how to read the weather, and it was a really beautiful environment for a kid who was just curious and just liked to learn because there were plenty of opportunities to learn. And it is very rare, particularly being Afro American, being raised out in the West, because with very few exceptions, being Los Angeles and Oakland and a couple of other places, there really isn't a critical mass of Black people. So if you did not go to a Black church, you tended to not get much of the Black Afro-American traditional aspects of culture. So luckily I did have that going to church as a kid, and also spending summers in Louisiana with my mother's family, where, up until the 80s, they were still farming. And luckily that they had been stable for so long that I can still to this day go to the grave sites of my great grandparents, which is very rare for Afro Americans. And in that environment where we weren't quite getting the same kind of upbringing that my parents and grandparents had, my parents really took it upon themselves to make sure that we understood the value and the heritage of Afro Americans in the United States. So with several other families, we would get together on Sundays and talk about Black history and the value of our cultural ancestors. So when it came time for me as an adult, I was trained as a musician in the traditional sense, learning from older people. When I moved to Los Angeles at the age of 18, I found that my upbringing was quite unique in that I had stable men around, and that really paid a dividend when it came to speaking to elder musicians, both Afro Americans, and people who were from the Afro Caribbean cultures as well. And because I was able to endear myself to them, I was able to learn traditional musical and cultural techniques of expression that I did not see very much of, because jazz, being the music that I really wanted to play, had been steadily institutionalized and was being turned into something that was much more akin to Western classical music, in accordance with methods of the people of European descent who ran things. And more I was being told that my sound was too traditional and lacked universal appeal. It lacked universal appeal, meaning that the white people who controlled it could not easily access it culturally, mentally, or they couldn't do it. So therefore, it had no value to them because they were running things, which created a critical mass of rage that was within me, that gave me cause to match my vocabulary with it, because I knew what was happening was wrong, and I knew that it had a deeply institutionalized historical base to it that I wanted to find out more about. So then, knowing that the window was closing for traditional expression as far as jazz and Black music was concerned, and that most of the people my age were uh, going into hip hop, meaning that they were dependent heavily on technology and not really thinking musically, though they were still involved in the oral tradition, I decided to go to college to further my understanding of Black music and Black culture and match my vocabulary with that growing rage. So since then, I've earned a PhD in ethnomusicology, in which I specialize in Afro-American cultural expression, especially with regard to the commodification of Black cultural products, how Black cultural products are brought to market, marketed, and sold, most often to people who have no cultural reference whatsoever. So from the very beginning, we have been preoccupied with white acceptance of our cultural aspects. So in that regard, we remove a lot of the humanity, a lot of the beauty, a lot of the magnanimousness that has come out of the environment in which we have been stuck in order to be acceptable to people who don't care and don't want to know the cultural context behind it. They just want something to conspicuously consume. And so that has been the focus of my work, and why I am not well liked within the institutional world, because I really want America, the United States, to match what it does in action, what it says on paper. Because I come from the only group of people in the United States who cannot point to a specific point of origin or a language. Everything that we have are vestiges from Africa that we have found a way to utilize here. And once we do, that's fine and well until a dollar value gets assigned to it. And then it is slowly eroded down to nothing, which is why most Black cultural products don't stand the test of time. They are useful in the moment, but they don't stand the test of time because most of the integrity, the integral parts of what makes it so beautiful, are removed for the sake of conspicuous consumption of people who really don't matter, except for the fact that they have money to spend. And it's a lot better for Black people to be making records or catching touchdown passes or dunking a basketball than digging a ditch or working on somebody's farm. And it's been the same sort of scenario for us since the very beginning. And the current work that I'm doing on the life of George W. Walker, who was one of the founding fathers of the Harlem Renaissance and one of the first Black superstars and recording stars, the same things that I see that plagued his life 120 years ago still plague Black artists to this very day. And because of his politics, the way that he thought of Black cultural sovereignty, wanting to own it, to maintain it, and to curate it, regardless of what someone else thought, that did not endear him to the powers that be, and he was summarily erased from the historical record. And so I've spent the last 7 years or so piecing his life story together through an infinity of trace data. And once I bring that to bear, I think it will prove very helpful for young people who have been denied access to their own cultural birthrights, their own history, the beauty that makes them who they are. I think that once they see how the first generation after emancipation handled themselves, they can see a true example for better or for worse, because they did make mistakes along the way, but then they can see how someone else did it. There's a record, there's a precedent being set so that they can use that, bring it back to ritual and move forward instead of being preoccupied with what someone who doesn't matter wants. They should do what they want, what they know that their ancestors would have wanted, and what their descendants will want once they become an ancestor.